Welcome to the Greenroom, a podcast series by Sustainable Buildings Canada, designed to help the building industry stay informed on the latest trends, policies, and practical solutions for creating more sustainable buildings across Canada. I'm your host, Jeff Fredericks, and today we're diving into an important topic, the National Building Code of Canada and the National Energy Code for Buildings. Specifically, we're going to discuss how a series of workshops led by SBC are helping building officials across the country work with the latest higher tier energy code requirements. So we're joined here today by Melissa Felder. She's an energy and environment expert who's leading this initiative on behalf of SBC. Welcome, Melissa. And we've got Dave Potter. He's a building code consultant and former chief official of the town of Newmarket. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
And Sean Mason from Sean.ca, a housing developer and advocate for net zero ready homes with current projects in Barrie, Ontario. Welcome, Sean.
Hi.
Good to see you guys. All right, well, let's dive right in. Dave, we'll start with you. I wondered if you could briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background in building codes.
So I'm now a retired former chief building official involved in the industry for over 40 years. The last 20, I've been involved in instructing and facilitating building code courses for qualification requirements. I've been actively involved in code development over the years with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and industry stakeholders in developing upgrading the code, and more recently involved in SB 12, making sure that our industry participants know the building code, and as well the new 936 under the NBC, which has been adopted by a number of provinces.
Terrific. Sean, how about you? Could you tell us a little bit about your work and the various sustainability?
I've been building for a little over 20 years. Currently, the business is focused entirely in Barrie, Ontario. And we've been typically a net zero or an Energy Star 3-story townhouse builder with pocket neighborhoods and a sustainable focus. Recently, the city of Barrie has undertaken an initiative to upzone all of their lands where they're wanting more density. So all of the lands that we've had have been upzoned to going 6 stories or more. And so we've transitioned into a Part 3 builder. And we're currently building a mass timber, cross-laminated timber, CFS, geothermal building in Barrie. And that's the beginning of probably about 2,500 units.
Awesome. Great. Melissa, I understand you're managing the SBC Code Acceleration Fund workshops, which is really part of the discussion today. What kind of work does SBC focus on?
Thanks, Jeff. So, as you know, SBC has been involved in a lot of savings by design work over the years. That's sort of been the flagship in the past. Like, it's delivered over 600 events in that space in the Ontario region. But more topically, however, and what people don't always recognize is the SBC's focus on market transformation. So we're really looking to engage with different communities of practice, whether that's the owner or builder, different sort of service professionals, in really looking to advance sustainable buildings in Canada. CAF, this event that we're here today for, is certainly one initiative looking to engage with building officials across Canada to advance code uptake, but we also do other kinds of projects, including in mass timber, to help build the value proposition for building with mass timber as opposed to incumbent materials like concrete, and also work in affordable housing. So their Energy Spring initiative, which looks to connect sort of affordable housing providers with the market and looking to advance deep retrofits in that space. So a lot of the different types of programs.
Okay, great. And as it relates to the Code Acceleration Fund workshops, what's the primary objective of that initiative?
Yeah, so it's funded through Natural Resources Canada, and the intent is really to engage with building officials across Canada to give better understanding of the National Energy Code for Buildings. So the initiative is really predicated on delivery of virtual training. So we do workshops, very intense technical training, about half-day sessions, run by Larry Bryden, who you both know. And we've done 7 of those to date in Ontario and Saskatchewan. And it's really intended to help building officials both understand, parse, and learn how to evaluate applications that meet these higher tiers of the code.
Gotcha. Sean, I guess from your experience, what are some of the largest misconceptions builders and developers have when it comes to the National Energy Code and higher tier requirements?
I can't speak more to the National Energy Code because I'm not a code expert. We'll leave that to Dave. But I would say working on higher energy requirements or getting better, basically. I think the hard part about that is not doing it. You know, you buy a window with this energy rating or that energy rating, or you're putting in that insulation or this insulation, you just buy a better one. It's not doing it better that is the hard part. It's the decision to actually do it better is the hard part. Making that decision. Once you flip the switch and say, that's the way I'm going to go, that's where we're going to take the company, that's the hard part. And once you make that decision, then it's just putting the products together.
Right. And when you say making that decision, can you elaborate a little bit about where that struggle is?
Well, over the past, I guess I built the first Energy Star house in Canada that was occupied in 2007, maybe 2008, when they're in that range. And everybody was so focused on the differential cost to actually build it. You know, it was it 10 cents more in insulation? Was it 20 cents more in windows? And I'm using those numbers because I remember in that time we were building for $55 a foot.
Right.
Now we're building in the 150, 200s. Your energy efficiency and being better, it's such a nominal part. It's such a marginal uptick that I don't think it makes any sense anymore to not do it. The customers have changed. They want a better car. They want a better, you know, every year you get a new phone for that marginal little bit. Why don't you buy that on your house? And a lot of that comes back to the builder saying, I want to do this. And so when we were selling houses for 400 grand and there was an uptick of 2%, it was consequential. When you're selling houses, a townhouse, let's say, you know, maybe not today, but a year ago, for $800,000, that 1%, it's nominal.
Right. Gotcha. We're going to come back to that a little later. But Dave, why don't you walk us through what the NECB tiers actually mean and why they're such a critical part of responding to both the housing crisis here in this country and climate change?
So the NECB is a national document that provinces adopt on their own. Ontario at this point has not chosen to go with that. We're still with the SB 10 and the SB 12. But I suspect in the next code change, we'll move into the 936, which is the low-rise portion of the energy efficiency requirements of the National Building Code. There are 5 tiers presently. Tier 1 starting at the lowest energy efficiency and Tier 5, the top end. And as you progress through those tiers, it becomes a little more complicated. You got more things that you have to be aware of when building. So the provinces have to have a readiness. They have to have capacity for providing both prescriptive and performance path options. And affordability, as Sean said, factors into this as well, because as you start looking at higher performing windows, it's renewables in some of these higher tiers, the cost increases. So but you've also got the payback over the lifespan of the building. So it's the initial upfront cost that sometimes is a little prohibitive, especially in these times when we're dealing with issues about trade and whatnot. They're also breaking down trade barriers across Canada to allow some of these products to be used in other provinces. And approvals, we want to see them quicker. Things often take time, especially if you're going through a long process of review and whatnot. But at the municipal level, we've done fairly well in the province of Ontario by requiring certain mandates for turnaround times for both permit review and for inspections. So we're trying to help with keeping those costs of building down.
And speaking, I guess, of the municipal level, what's some of the feedback that you're hearing from the municipalities in terms of this work?
It's complicated. One of the things is training. We're short of building officials in the province. Right now, there's a bit of a lull in construction, but once things ramp up, we're going to be needing a lot more individuals in the building sector and the trades as well. But it's time consuming. And I'll talk about some tools that we have a little later to advance some of these reviews in a more timely fashion.
You mentioned earlier about training and code officials on new products. And for years, I used to always have to get engineers to come in and say that HVAC is done properly because the building officials didn't even want to look at it, which was incredibly frustrating to us because of the time and the extra expense. And we would hear building officials say, oh, let him do it. And I just thought that was weird because they weren't learning on it. But when you're really on the cutting edge, like our building right now at Rainwater, which is CLT, CFS, high density grout blocks, we've had Terrion there because this is the first time Terrion has had in Ontario a residential condominium mass timber for sale. Up until now, they've all been office buildings or rentals. And so Terrion's actually been on our site. I think they're actually there today taking a look because they're trying to develop their own standards on how do they look at common elements and what's structure and what's not in this brand new building form. So education and getting ahead of this, and which comes down to building officials being proactive and getting out of the office and actually on site. And I give the guys in the city of Barrie, we tried to do this. I've said it's the first of its kind in the world. They actually engaged us 6 months before we put our first permit in. And I was really appreciative of that. It still took a long time, but at least they did it. And they said, yes, we're willing to look at this because it was so brand new, right?
Let's expand on that a bit, Sean, just in terms of the things that work well when there's early engagement. So getting those building officials in early, getting well, now you mentioned Terrion coming to the site, but this whole idea of educating early in the process so you're not up against the wall last minute, how critical is that for the work you're doing?
So it's ironic that Melissa mentioned a few moments ago about the charrettes and the initiatives with Sustainability Canada and the education. Was I did my first, with another prior company, I did our first charrette in probably 2012 or so with Larry Bryden, actually. So it was a long time ago. So we've done a lot of these. So I'm a wholehearted believer in that. You get everybody in a room, you throw the ideas on the table, and you banter it about. Even when we don't do it through a structured process, I don't go to tender or I don't develop a house like without going to my plumber and saying, what do you think? Sure. That takes a lot of trust because generally plumbers, as an example, would say, well, I'm not talking to you. I don't know if I have the contract. And I say, well, if you don't do this, you're not getting the contract. Right. So it's the chicken and an egg thing. And it comes down to really being, I think, persuasive to get that person on side. So you start dealing with different types of trades. Okay. Like the building I keep on talking about because it's so topical to this. Every single trade in there has never done this before. No one's ever done this before. Right. So there's been so much trust. And sometimes, you'll do, like our framer, he had never done CFS. He had never done CLT. They'd always been a stick framer. They'd done 6 stories and they panelized. So that's how we're doing this building. But there was so much trust there. And sometimes when I get an extra or I look at it and he says, well, Sean, that was supposed to take 100 hours and it took 500. And you go, yeah, like I've got to accept that because it is the first of its kind. So to your question, how important is it? You have to have these conversations. If you're on the cutting edge of anything, you have to have the conversations. You have to have trusted partners. You also have to have trusted financial partners. Like your bank needs to understand that this is a different thing, that you're trying to do something different. And sometimes the customer doesn't care. And that's really unfortunate. And I think it's wrong, but it's a fact. So a lot of the times you're doing this simply because you want to do a better product.
So I guess the second part of the question is actually on challenges that occur. I imagine communication becomes critical too. You just mentioned the customer not caring. Perhaps part of it is just managing expectations as well about some of these things that may take a little longer because you're working with new stuff.
It's also technical.
Yeah.
It's so when you're building, like we sold this building in 2021 really, when you couldn't go into a sales office.
Yeah.
So we've done a really good job on putting across the benefits on our net zero ready townhouses. People understood that, but they understood a townhouse. Right. Nobody who bought in this condo building actually knew it was CLT. Now that's on me. I didn't do a good job on that, but they didn't get the benefit. When they're coming around now and doing their color package selections and they're seeing the building, they're going, oh wow, that's really cool. That was very hard to communicate to the customer. Right. And I understand that because Jesse here filming this is an expert on filming this. He's not an expert on going into construction. Right. If I have a dentist come in to buy a house, there's no way I can go into his dentistry and say, do it this way. So the fact that the ability of them to understand what we're doing, it's minimal. It's minimal. Sure. So you have to look at who's coming into the office and where their skill sets are. And if they're not in building, they're not going to understand.
Right. And again, communication, I guess, has a critical role. Melissa, you mentioned that SBC's code-focused workshops are typically built in partnership with the various provincial building officials. Why is their involvement so valuable in terms of how you're structuring that work, and how does it address some of the things that we've been chatting about in terms of challenges?
That's a good question. So, I think as Sean was alluding to, like the building officials are often the front line of the regulatory constraints, and they often have good awareness, if not some sympathy for what builders. I thought that might get a little bit on. But the associations, which are the groups that we tend to work with when delivering the workshops, are in effect like the collective voice of the building officials for different regions, and they help guide in terms of any kind of regional nuances, what type of archetypes are most useful for participants to understand when we walk through the workshop. They help inform the exercises that we do in terms of like heat pumps and things like that. So to give participants a flavor of how to evaluate these newer technologies. So they're very critical in the delivery of these workshops effectively. And I think I'll add one more thing in that we also collect information from the participants. So we're hearing from hundreds of building officials what are the main pain points in the evaluation of higher code adoption. We can flow that back to the associations so they can build awareness of these challenges and ideally look to act upon them for their constituency.
So what do they say?
Well,
What are the pain points of builders doing a better job? What are the pain points
for building officials.
from the building official side? What do they say?
So incomplete documentation is often a holdup from builders and designers from the builder perspective. So that can slow things down because it results in more iterations required.
We hear that from the guys doing the plan review and the architectural side too. Okay.
So that's the big one. But the biggest challenge, which is, again, the pretext for this kind of initiative, is their own lack of understanding of the code. And that's a self-admitted, like we do a pre-survey and they all come in saying, I have very low to moderate understanding of the National Energy Code for buildings. And it's not just Ontario, which, as you mentioned, is not regulated to do that. It's also other regions as well. So that's quite interesting because this is the perspectives of about 400 people that we've worked with so far in the workshops.
And as codes change and as types of buildings change, like mass timber, if your building officials don't understand it and you have a dearth of them now and they're all retiring, imagine what's going to be like in 5 years. I mean, thank God for the housing recession, right? Like it's giving you time to catch us.
Well, in fact, Dave, maybe you want to expand on that, and just in terms of some of the challenges from the building officials' perspective. I mean, certainly coming in and having the knowledge base, whether it's there or not, but what are some of the other things that you're
I mean, kind of building on what Sean said earlier about building officials not being fully aware of things. We had a very successful eco housing project in Newmarket. It came in at LEED Platinum and it was entirely new to building officials. So we had to train the building officials. But one of the successes of that project was that we also engaged the trades and the product suppliers. So everybody was doing joint training together. And the nice thing about that is we were getting an understanding of the challenges that the builders and the trades were having, and they were getting an understanding of our challenges, and it worked out very well. And at the end of the day, that was really the successful part of that project, was the joint training. So the challenges nowadays is just engaging, getting students involved or engaged at an early enough age that they want to consider either becoming a building official or a tradesperson at an early age before they get into colleges and universities. The other thing is ensuring that the colleges and universities are providing proper training or adequate training when it comes to things around energy efficiency.
right.
You've got this curriculum that maybe only touches base on, say, something like the National Energy Code or 936 or SB 12 on a very small portion of the course. That's where organizations like SBC and our parent organization, the OBOA, the Building Officials Association, we fill that void by providing training and also allowing people to prepare them for qualification exams.
Gotcha. And just in terms of getting perhaps back to some of the pain points that developers face, I imagine a big part of it is on the delay front, right? Things that just take too long to get approved. Are there examples that you can sort of think about where, those delays, obviously they were frustrating, but came down to just a lack of knowledge? You were saying earlier that you run up against people.
Oh yeah, probably on my part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would admit that when we put in, so this CLT CFS building, first of its kind, the architecture going in was not perfect.
Right.
So there was details in there that the building officials accurately pointed out that we had to address. I didn't use a mass timber architect For our first one, that was probably a bit of a mistake. And sorry, Steve, but I said it. But they've learned through this whole thing too. But when you put something into a city and they take 2 months to return, to look at it and a month to get back, and there's 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
So incomplete applications. And for a small or a medium-sized developer, like I do all that stuff myself. All right, so I'm not creating the documents, but I'm putting them in and I'm making the decisions. So if something gets missed, that's on me. If you were a Mattamy or a Tribute or something with big, massive teams, that probably won't happen and that will move quicker.
Right.
But on the smaller side, especially when you're moving fast, things will get missed, and that's on me. So I have to recognize that.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of goes back to what I said earlier, but you have to have a lot of trust. You also have a lot of that introspection and know when you screw up yourself and take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And I know that on my developments, one of my financial partners said a little while ago, they said, can't we just do the same thing twice and actually make some money? Why do you always have to do something different?
Yeah.
And is it ADD? I don't know. Do I get bored? Do I think we need to do a better job? I do. I think we need to do a better job because most of the world doesn't give a crap.
Right.
And so if we're not going to do it, who is? And I'm not taking on that advocacy for the entire industry, but I do think we need to do a better job. So you have to have an introspection and understand where you're going to make mistakes and where your own weaknesses are. And I think it's a different type of developer that actually does this sort of stuff up front and takes on that challenge.
And then, of course, it's sharing those experiences, right? And that's kind of what we're doing here is to talk about them as somebody who's gone through it early on, and here are some of the key learnings that I got out of the last journey.
I think really to that point, when Energy Star started, the builders that were really pushing hard were myself, Paul Galini, Mattamy, and they all talked. When I was at the Mass Timber Conference last week, I ran into another builder talking to Enercan. He was from BC, West Bank, I think it was.
Okay.
And builders doing the next level, we all talk.
Yeah.
Like there was no secrets held back. We didn't say, I can't tell you that, that's my proprietary. Now, Enercan is good at that because if they give you some funding for that, which they are for this one building, I have that responsibility to talk. But it's also, do you want to?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and finding the various platforms and places to share this knowledge becomes important. And I guess these workshops, Melissa, so far you're learning a lot as well from the participants that are attending them in terms of things that are coming out of those discussions, right? Are there some highlights that you're starting to, or even key insights that are coming out that you can speak to?
I think, the key insights are ones that we've brought up already. Like one is their lack of understanding. And I think that provides like a justification for the support that Enercan is doing, not just for SBC, but many different associations that are looking to advance code adoption awareness across Canada, including in even like First Nations communities and things like that, which is a whole other kind of conversation. We talked a little bit about the financial pressure, and Sean's been alluding to that as well. I think the only thing I'd add there is if the timeline for review is protracted and the builder's aware of that going in, that's just one more reason to not build to a higher tier. So I think that's one thing that I would add. And as I mentioned earlier, the survey results like really underscore the self-admitted lack of understanding of
Well, you've got developers admitting lack and building officials. We're a wonderful industry.
Exactly.
We're all ignorant.
We have a bit of work to do.
Well, exactly, but as things change, you do have that bit of work to do. And then if you want to bring in the planning side, like how are you laying it out as a traditional way? Are you doing a grid network? Are you doing new urbanism?
Yeah.
Whole new network and whole new different parameters. And then you put that into a planning department. Do they even like it? Do their zoning bylaws allow for it? Like I remember on my current project trying to get 612 roofs that are easy to put solar panels onto a main road. They didn't like that. I'm like, but that's the type of roof I need if I'm going to put solar panels on. But that didn't fit the architectural guidelines. No, fortunately, the province has now gotten rid of the architectural guidelines, but it's another complication.
Right. And I guess that's the other thing that must be so important is the role that advocacy, the role of educating a lot of these key officials plays in what you do, right? Like, I mean, part of it is I guess bringing them on site and showing them some of the stuff that you're working on so that they understand where it's going, and because that's got to be a big challenge.
It's been a huge challenge over the years.
Yeah.
So before I left Mason Home, so probably 2007, 2008, we had a huge site out in Peterborough, and it was developed as a 40 to 50 foot front load lots with front loading garages projecting, big right-of-ways. And I remember I went to the planning director there and I said, I want to do new urbanism. And we took it up to 1,200 lots. So 340 or 350 up to 1,200. Okay. And that fight at council to have laneways and not have a laneway in a condo was enormous. Right. And then I've been fighting that for, I'm going to say, 12, 13 years. I feel some vindication, which is bittersweet in hindsight, because the current official plan and zoning bylaw of Barrie has adopted a ton of what I've been
pushing for,
arguing about for years, but now it means my competitors can do it.
Yeah, sure.
And so I've found over the past 10, 12 years, my advantage has been in the way I develop my land, because most people say, I don't want to do it that way, the way I'm doing it, and it gives me an advantage when we actually get to the build product. Okay. Now that the zoning bylaw is encouraging it, I can see some of that advantage eroding away. Yeah. Do I believe it's right to be happening? Yes. When I read the zoning bylaw, I was like, well, I suggested that. And that's kind of bittersweet because it's there, but you also know you fought for it for 10 years. Yeah. And there's a lot of sweat to get that done.
Well, but
at least they listened.
They listened, and that's the rewarding part.
Yeah.
So
and that's when your planning directors becomes so important, and that's when your counselors become so important. And what I found is when you're trying to change development standards, usually you talk to the mayor or the counselors, and they go, oh, absolutely, that's great. And then you get back to staff, and they say, well, it doesn't fit.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
I don't know. I think it's important, though, to just, reiterate or articulate why all this work matters. And I'd like you to kind of speak to that too, Sean. Just why put yourself out there? Like, let's unpack your why. What's motivating you?
I have a son.
Yeah. Okay.
You got a daughter.
Right.
That's why.
So it's the future.
Absolutely.
It's all about the future.
Absolutely.
Sure, as you said, you were doing the right thing here. It may be hard.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Do I think building mass timber? Yes. So when mass timber and geo, absolutely, I think so. Like the current building during construction it emits 90% less carbon. That's a lot. Yeah. That's enormous. It's less carbon. It's more effort.
Right.
But it's less carbon. But I remember when the city of Barrie started upzoning everything, and my partner said, well, do you want to build concrete or steel? And I said, well, I want to do mass timber. And they said, but you don't understand mass timber. I said, well, I don't understand concrete or steel either. I've been doing townhouses. So why don't I wanted to pick what I thought was going to have the longest legs. And I thought mass timber had that longest legs. On the current building, at Rainwater, we've done a CLT on the horizontal, and the vertical have been CFS, and we did that over engineering it for a 5-story building because that could take us to 18 stories.
Gotcha.
And so I wanted to figure it out on the small building before we started screwing up on the big ones. And that's why the government got involved. They said, we like this technology because your mass timber code can now go up to 18 stories, but no one knows how to do it. So that's why this building is important. It's like figuring it out. And that's why Terrion is there all the time. That's why we do extra engineering inspections. Like the engineers there all the time taking a look because we want to know that this works for 18 stories.
Yeah. And getting people to buy in on the value of this work. Dave, maybe you want to just elaborate in your profession, building officials. This isn't just about, oh, I got to read up on these codes. Are you finding more and more people really understand how important this is right now at this time in sort of history to get this work right and to advance it? Are you finding there's a groundswell of...
There's a thirst for in more knowledge in these areas, especially the new and innovative technologies, for instance.
Right.
And making sure that we aren't putting up more barriers.
Right.
There's a bit of a misconception that municipalities are holding up building permits. Well, more often than not, the building permit's ready to go. Yeah. It's all those other secondary approvals that need to be met as applicable law before the building permit can be issued. So we're kind of sitting there just waiting to issue the building permit, go out and do inspections and get things moving along. We don't want to slow things down. Yeah. We're kind of, time is money. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I talk to home builders associations about is what's costing you time and money out in the field. Sometimes it's the deficiencies. It's not doing things that should be done right. Air barriers is a classic example. We've got this provision in the building code now that you have to do an air barrier inspection because it's so important to the fabric of the building for durability, comfort, energy savings and so on and so forth. So we're focusing on new products and materials all the time, and how they interrelate to one another. Detailing on drawings is a good example. I like to see color coding for the air barrier system to actually see where that is. It helps the site staff, trades. It also helps our inspectors when they're out doing inspections and so on. So it's that knowledge, getting all those checklists done. We developed the EADS form way back in 2012, and that's still being used today. We've updated it.
And it still doesn't work great.
Still
needs improvement.
It still needs work. It does. And now we're developing checklists on 936 under the National Building Code. Very similar. When you get into the performance requirements, it tends to be a little more complicated. And as Sean said, building officials might tend to shy away from that and rely on third-party submissions and reviews. They might do some spot checking of an energy advisor's submission analysis. We look for a final air tightness test report, making sure that it's comparable to the design that was done on the house and so on and so forth. So, but we have limited time. I mean, an inspector may have 4 or 5 different subdivisions undergo all at once, and each builder's building differently. So they kind of have to change their mindset as they go from site to site, and they're looking at key things at various stages. We aren't there looking at everything that's happening on the site. We're basically spot checking.
Yeah, understood. And I guess just as far as a message that you would have to the building community, those developers that are doing this work and potentially complaining that it's taking too long to get my permits, what best advice do you have for them just in terms of the completing the applications, doing it correctly?
Drawing coordination is probably the big thing, making sure that the data on your energy evaluations submissions matches what's on the other document, making sure you got the right areas, the right percentage of windows, the right standard operating procedures in place, so that you don't get the feedback and delays. Because every time you do a submission, there's a review time, and then it has to go back, and then it has to be resubmitted.
Yeah, there's your 4 months.
Yeah,
That's 4 months, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting you shared that idea that there's a misconception out there in the industry that building officials are just sitting around, delaying things sort of on purpose or whatever. But that was expressed too, Melissa, with the Saskatchewan building officials out of that workshop that you guys held. It's the exact same sentiment that we're the problem kind of thing. And the message I heard from those folks was that we really want to educate the building community that no, that's not the case. We're not the problem here. We have to work together to make sure that we get solid applications the first time. So do you want to elaborate at all on that theme, that because you're taking these workshops, I guess, across the country, really underscoring that message that we need to work better together, getting the work done right the first time, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, as Dave alluded to, there's a lot of sort of unique site-specific nuances there that aren't necessarily addressed through a workshop format, that it's a more general interpretation of the code and trying to build the broader understanding of how to evaluate those kind of applications. But as I mentioned, like flowing that information around barriers back to the associations, we think is definitely a beneficial outcome of these kinds of workshops, including in Saskatchewan and Ontario. There's some other resources that we're developing. It's the NECB. It's called the Best Practice Guide, as well as Better Than Code case studies that we're doing. And these resources are being sort of adapted as we move across Canada. Like we've done Saskatchewan, Ontario. We're going to be doing Nova Scotia. We're in advanced discussions with a group that's doing training for First Nations communities. And we're looking at some work in Thunder Bay as well. So ideally, we're kind of migrating and evolving these resources to be more universally applicable, but understanding that there are some regional nuances that aren't necessarily covered through these kinds of broader documents.
Yeah. Sean, just back to you in terms of messages that you have for your peers in this industry. I mean, being one of the first to kind of go through this stuff, we all recognize that it's important work. It may be a daunting task for somebody in your position to strive for those higher tiers because they're concerned about these slowdown and cost and money and all that sort of stuff. Can you share your?
I think it's more of a daunting task for a developer of my size, where you have the owner being the operator. I think the larger ones have an easier route to do a better job on energy efficiency or things like that, because they can have staff who are experts in that. But it's the owner's decision to make that. And I think, and I can't remember which one of you said that the building officials in Saskatchewan thought that they're the problem. But the developers always feel that the building officials always think that everyone's rich. Well, you look at how many builders are going bankrupt right now. So I think that comes down to an antagonistic relationship, which then to get past that, you need to be in the same room and talk. And I think that's what Sustainable Buildings Canada did really, really well. Like I remember our first charrette, the building officials were invited. And at that point, they all said, we don't want to go to this. Like, why do we want to go to this? That's a day out of our schedule. So they didn't want to be a part. Now they do. You're seeing a big change in the planning departments and in the building departments. And they are I don't want to say cooperating, that's the wrong word. They're communicating. But the builder still has to make that communication. Now I know that the OHBA and Build have tried every 3 months they try to reach out, like Paula Tenuta and Dave Wilkes do a really good job of that, meeting with the building officials. We've finally got that going on in Simcoe County because we brought Build up to say, please help us do that. It's more communication. And so answer your question, I think bigger builders have an easier time doing a better job. Do they make the decision to do it? I don't know. That's the hard part.
Got it. And Melissa, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I mean, when Ontario didn't proceed with the NACB, we were concerned with the CAF workshop. We're like, oh, maybe there's not going to be interest in these workshops in Ontario because it's not a requirement for building officials necessarily. The almost opposite happened. We've had so much interest in Ontario to the point where we approached NRCan saying, we have all this interest. What do we do with it? And that's why they're supporting some work in Thunder Bay. And so it's quite interesting. Like, I think to your point, the appetite is there for learning, even if it's not necessarily a requirement. And we've seen that with the type of uptake.
It's that part of readiness, making the industry ready to adopt these standards when they come into play, rather than imposing the standards on the province and then saying, okay, now we got to look about training as an afterthought. And that's not the way it should be.
So then as a forethought, to get builders ready earlier, there should be an incentive to the earlier adopters. So if you're doing an energy efficient subdivision, or if you're doing 50% affordable as an example, or if you're doing a better density, there should be a fast track for approvals and a job captain inside each city that says, that's a better development, that's a better development, put that at the top and we're going to help you get, that's where
I think that's it.
So when Mayor Jeff Lehman this was like 2012, 2013, they said they were going to do it at that point. The planner that they hired to do that in the city of Barrie quit immediately, and it took 10 years to get it back. Nuttall's brought it back now, and I think that's an enormous thing. Every municipality should do that. They say if a builder wants to do affordable or energy efficient or whatever, don't make it harder, make it easier, and recognize that that's a really cool thing to do and help them do it. Because as an example, current project again, the biggest report on that site was a 350-page environmental for the geothermal. And we couldn't go more than 400 feet deep, whereas Enbridge wanted to go 1,000 feet, which dries up the cost because they just said, we don't want to do it. That was the biggest issue. If we could have gone through that, the geothermal would have been half the cost. But it wasn't.
The other side of that is making it disincentive if you don't do it.
Right.
Which is but then code's got to do that.
Yeah,
So as code, so I don't think you can have a disincentive or put you have to do this. I think that's when the developers just go, well, we don't care. But as soon as they see that they can save a year on their approvals, that's when they'll.
But the disincentive would be no cost saving. If you've got a cost saving, that's an incentive. If it's going to cost you more to do it the wrong way or the other way that we've been doing the old way, then there's obviously an incentive. Trade-offs is a good example. You give the trade-offs for those that want to start doing air tightness testing. By doing that, you build capacity into the industry.
Right. Just curious. I mean, some of these incentives that you're talking about, I thought I heard you talk about Japan. You were at a conference recently, and there's some really cool incentives going on, I guess, with the government there on building, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to share that with us?
So last week, NRCan was there and they wanted to listen to the seminars and they never got out of their room to do so. They were very disappointed they didn't hear the seminars. So I tried to give some of the feedback. I thought it was amazing that we think we are advanced here. We're not. In the Scandinavian countries that we're talking, and they had the policy people there. So they had a policy maker from a prefecture in he was the national Japan assistant housing minister maybe. And there was a similar people from China. There was similar people from Spain. There was one from Brazil. There was a bunch of Germans, especially from Netherlands. There was tons of people from Holland there, and they were talking about how advanced they were, and they just do it. Yeah. Like they just did it. But I thought it was interesting in Japan. If you build with mass timber, they give you an automatic 30% bump in the size of your building. If you did that in Canada, everybody would build mass timber, or whatever the analogy is you want to use. They also had an incentive to use mass timber that effectively they said it pays for your mass timber.
Okay.
That's a big that's a big uptick.
Yeah. And I guess ultimately going to these conferences, learning what's happening around the world, bring that knowledge back, and hopefully some of these insights that we gather can inspire change here as well.
I think if a municipality wants to do something, they need to be bold. And I will give you an example of last night. I was in City Barrie Council last night and Springwater last night. And the City of Barrie has a development charge waiver program that we're trying because the industry's dead right now. Right. No one's building. Right. So they have said they are willing to waive for buildings that are 20% affordable. And my next one's going to be 70% affordable. But for ones that are 20% affordable and at least 6 stories, so mid-rise and up, they were going to waive $30 million of development charges over the next year. You had to have your permit in by the end of the year and you had to be into the ground by the middle of next year.
Okay.
Last night, I was blown away. There was 3 people sitting in council listening to this. And they said, the uptake has been fantastic. Let's raise it to 80 billion. I was like, wow, are you kidding me?
These guys want to build.
And they voted it, and it was done, and it was an amendment on the floor brought in by the deputy mayor, and it was done, and 5 minutes later, I was like, I can't believe that. Like the speed and the decisiveness and the bold action, that is an incentive. Yeah. So now if you suddenly know there's that big pot of money, your building goes more than 20% affordable, which is what they want.
Yeah. It was a good example is the kind of stuff, I guess, Dave, that we need to hear more municipalities take, as Sean says, that bold sort of step to incent people to build in their communities and build right. So we just want to wrap this up a bit here. We've covered a lot of ground, but are there some things that you guys really want to hit home in terms of messages to the building community about both the importance of these workshops, but what we've discussed here today, which is in many ways, how do we work better together? How do we collaborate? How do we keep the big objective in mind, which is building better buildings in this country? Dave, maybe I'll start with you.
So I think the initiative that SBC took with the Code Accelerator Fund project was excellent. I think something like that for the whole industry, not just building officials, would be nice to see. There's a lot of changes happening. We've got existing buildings. We've got large gains to make in existing buildings. The new stuff we seem to be doing not too bad as far as energy efficiency. It's the old stuff that needs to be changing. And just making sure the codes stay current. We've got climate change to deal with. We've got more severe weather. We got things like that happening. And the National Building Code is starting to adopt some of those, wind loading issues. I put in a code request in 2015 for roof uplift in the wake of tornadoes in the province. Of course, recently we developed a CSA standard on low-rise wind loading. And your former chief building official from Barrie was a member of that CSA committee that we developed those standards. Those need to be brought into the building code, but it's a slow process because you've got all these provinces that have aligned and basically, collaborated and said, we need some national standard in place that all the provinces can adopt, not just certain provinces in the West Coast and a couple in the East Coast. We'd like to get a unified code across Canada so that we're all kind of, rowing our oars in the same direction and we can start using more of these innovative materials. We can start looking at, what the kind of training we need in mass timber construction and things like that and keep things moving along and make those opportunities available. For both people that are here and immigrants that want to come into the country. Kind of steer them into those trades that where it's necessary. Because we're going to find that we're going to have a shortage of skilled labor in the coming years if we don't.
That's a huge issue for sure. What about you, Melissa? Any final thoughts on what we've talked about today, but also how important this work is with these workshops?
It's just so many things I want to respond to, but I'll try to keep it. So on the mass timber, that just making me think about SBC's work. And there's a company in Quebec, Nordic, that's really interesting because they do vertical integration. Like they have their own forest to create the timber, to build in their own housing. And there's so many opportunities in that space for more domestic kind of resilience, especially in light of like the current situation with tariffs and things like that and supply chains. I think you're absolutely right, Dave, about enlarging kind of the workshop approach to include the builder perspective as well as others. That could be extremely valuable. In terms of code adoption specifically, one thing that we would like to build upon is the opportunity for broader partnerships, like working with the provincial code authorities to deliver training in those regions. Like British Columbia's has done some really interesting work in response actually to the heat dome and to those climate disasters. And they moved policy extremely fast to deal with those
does.
Right? So like how do we in Ontario and other regions kind of move that forward and ideally come to more of a universal framework that enables that across Canada and for Canadians? And also there's the federal opportunity, like what we're learning and conveying through these workshops and all of us, there is a direct line to NRCan and to those groups that are the authorities on the national codes. That's very interesting as well. In terms of SBC in particular, we're certainly a new face outside of Ontario. And we understand that it takes time to build that kind of awareness and time to articulate what we do, and also in a way that's sensitive to other organizations that work in that space. So I think there's kind of an internal need there. Maybe two more points is housing affordability.
Right.
And I think, Sean, that gets to something you said earlier about the lowered operational costs for operating a sustainable home. And those are still not necessarily, it's still not part of the everyday kind of conversation yet. So what can SBC do to offer programming in that area so that operational cost, that beneficial outcome is valued along with the purchase price, the sticker shock that usually comes with that.
Then the banks and the insurance companies have to recognize a better built house. RBC finally did that with their 35-year amortization. That took 15 years.
That's going to be a while. Yeah, that has to be.
So RBC is massively taking market share in the new home mortgage area because of that, because it drops the costs, their monthly costs so much on your mortgage. Similarly, right now on the opposite side actually is insurance for mass timber buildings. It's through the roof. It's because they don't get it. They don't get it.
But in Europe, it's a better situation.
Right.
And there's definitely a lot that can be done there. And then maybe one last point, like in the longer term, thinking of the everyday Canadian, like how we use language that speaks in a way that resonates, that they can understand, like around adaptation and resilience and human health and indoor air quality and all those kind of pieces, and make the connection how sustainable building really provides benefits in all those pieces while still dealing with the very systemic and absolutely critical problem of climate disruption.
Right. Sean, last word to you, and I think maybe getting back to what you talked about earlier, why you're doing all this in the first place. You talked about your son, you talked about the future, you talked about how important this work is, that we all sort of take it seriously because it's so critically important. Could you just sort of elaborate on some of the things that you're hopeful for in the future as it relates to building better buildings in this country?
So 2 comments I wanted to comment on with Melissa that I think will answer your question. One is the customers unfortunately don't care. I'm part of the CHB Net Zero Coalition. I say this all the time to Sonia. Unfortunately, the customer doesn't care. I think the customer should care. The only time they will buy a Tesla because they think it's green, but they won't buy a greenhouse because we don't know why. They just don't. And So it all comes down, it's dollars and cents. Doesn't save them money, then they'll buy it. If you could relate that back to quicker approvals and not carrying land for as long, and you could show it's a 25 grand savings, and the builder didn't put that in their pocket, but actually, especially in a time like now, actually pass that on to the customer, that's going to be an adoption. So that would come right back to the municipalities saying, hey, you're doing better, we're going to get you out in 3 months. Like, and in the US, it's 3 to 4 months for a development application, let alone a building permit. Here, we're years. We're absolutely years. The Ontario government has done some good things on that recently, where they've gotten rid of the ability to have an outside party appeal a minor variance, which means if you're a foot over, your neighbor can't hold you up for a year because it's a foot. So that was one thing that I would think you've got to make it dollars and cents. So if the cities and the municipalities and the provinces and the federal, and we know the federal want them. Like when I met Carney the other day, he's like, build, baby, build.
Right.
Then help us do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's about being fast and decisive. You just mentioned that you want to take SBC into other areas where you're respectful of the people that are there. Why? Just do it.
No,
Just,
well,
the premiers are getting rid of intertrade barriers. I think we need to stop being not necessarily so respectful. That's not the right way, but just go do. Just move and get stuff done. And
I think
if you try to be perfect, you are going to miss opportunities. And I think maybe that's the entrepreneur coming out of me. That I know what I said last night about the city of Barrie, then being decisive and bold and fast. Like, if we're going to do this, we have a point of crisis right now. We have a monster to the south of us that if we don't respond and build our internal industries better and communicate better and move, we're going to lose this opportunity. Now, it's a crisis or is it an opportunity? How are you looking at it? I see it as an opportunity. We can build Canada better now, but we got to move now. And that means move.
I would say collaborate, not compete. That's what I meant by being respectful. Like there's other organizations that are doing great.
Fine, different way to put
Collaborate.
it. Yeah, different way to put it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to argue with you.
No, sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a unique time right now for this country, and certainly you're echoing Carney's message about build, baby, build. Or you're in.
But use Canadian products. Yeah. So my building is 91% Canadian. Yeah. I'm using Nordic out of Quebec. I think they're
Phenomenal.
Hey, Nordic guys, you're amazing. I said that the other day at the conference. They're fantastic.
Right.
I make sure my steel is Canadian.
Yeah.
I'm buying Owens Corning pink bata. That's the guy I was talking to on the way in here because they make it in Scarborough.
Yeah.
Now, do that.
Yeah.
Like, don't just give it lip service. Actually do it. Carney's saying the other day that we're going to have all our made in Canada projects are going to use Canadian steel. Why were we not doing that for the past 50 years? Is that protectionism or is that smart?
Yeah.
I'm on a soapbox, literally.
Yeah, there we go. It's good to be on a soapbox, and it's good to have the three of you guys join us today and share your perspective on this work. We all know how important it is. It's great that you brought some examples. You all brought up some good examples of where it's being done well. The municipalities that are taking a bold approach, we'll hopefully see more of that in the future as well. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to continuing this conversation in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the Green Room. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on our Codes Acceleration workshops, be sure to visit us at sbccanada.org.